Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Quantum Leap Season 2, Episode 10. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So Ben finds himself in the middle of a treasure hunt, which is kind of pretty dope. The fact of the matter is he leaked into like the youngest sibling, Nadia, and they have two older siblings, Dean and Sarah. I kind of felt like I thought that's where Dean's story was going, where it ends up going, because Dean multiple times was like, I'm not Dina, I'm Dean. I was like, okay, so your family doesn't know. The fact is your sister keeps like defaulting to your default name. You even had to correct the lawyer Wells. I was like, okay, I figured that's where that was going, but either way, these siblings aren't on the best of terms. They have a very complicated relationship with their father. He wasn't there a lot. He was off gallivanting around kind of treasure hunting and stuff, and so he wasn't that much of a father, and we find out later on what it was at the heart of it, which is sad. Just like anything, death of losing his wife made him kind of like, he ran away from all of that, like trying to fill that hole in his heart rather than staying at home, being with his children that needed him. He kind of gallivanted trying to fill that void in other ways, just because it was his way of kind of running away from his problems instead of being there supporting his children while they were going through it, because they didn't only just lose a mom, they also lost their dad. Dean's the one I mean, we don't know how Nadia feels about their dad, because the fact is, it was interesting too, because like Sarah is the oldest, she's the more responsible one, she's married, she has children, and the fact is she's taking care of the rest of her siblings. And so they even made reference that Nadia never really knew their dad growing up because he wasn't really around a lot. So a lot of that, like, she kind of had to not only be a sister, she also kind of had to be a mom in a lot of extents, you know. Maybe it was their mom, but I think Sarah said like they didn't get to know, that Nadia in particular didn't get to know their dad, but maybe I'm misremembering, it was their mom. But either way, it's like we never get to hear Nadia's point of view, but Sarah does not have the best view of their dad. Dean, it's like, yeah, dad had his faults, but he was still our father, you know, and I think it's because it also matches their personality. Sarah's all about like responsibilities and stuff like that, because that's how she had to be. She has to be the more stable one in the family, where it seems like Dean is supposedly never holds down a job, is very like free spirited in a lot of ways, very much like their dad. I think that's also why Sarah probably bumps heads with Dean more than any of maybe Nadia. But to be fair, we don't know what Nadia and Sarah and Dean's relationships are really like outside of this episode, but in particular, Sarah really bumped heads with Dean a lot, because I think they're just like, it might be a thing of Sarah's more like their mom, whereas Dean's more like their dad. But either way, Sarah reluctantly goes along on this treasure hunt because she believes it's going to be a wild goose chase. But the fact of the matter is, in the original timeline, Dean went on their own and ended up not coming back. Like a week after going on this adventure, didn't come back. So this family pretty much falls apart afterwards. It's like you lost your mom, then you lost your dad, and one of your siblings died. It's just like, it's kind of sad to know what this future held for this family. I figured something was up with the lawyer, because he was the one like, oh, no, it's all Gucci. Oh, your dad was my best friend. I was like, my immediate thought was, did you kill him to get the treasure? I just felt like, because also it's that actor, the actor's name is Dan Bacaldo. I'm probably butchering that, I'm so sorry, but he's one of those actors where like, you see him from time to time. The thing that comes to my mind immediately is because I was watching a scene from it recently. I was like, he was in the 4th season of Barry. He's in like a little bit of like, isn't it like episode 3 of season 4? But he's one of those actors, like, there was that show he did with, oh god, what was that? There's that Australian comedian, I can't remember his name. He had an FX show a couple years back. I remember Dan played one of the main characters on it. He's just one of those actors that I felt like you're too specific, like, of an actor. Like, it's like, I've seen you and stuff, so I figured you were gonna pop up again, and he does. But I even love later on, even Addison's like, of course the lawyer's behind this. It's like, yeah, it makes sense, because, you know, like, the lawyer, greedy, trying to get the money type of situation. And once again, also like, oh, you're my best friend, made me immediately go like, did you kill him? But doesn't seem like that's the case. You sought an opportunity to snatch all this treasure because he never told you where it was. So, I mean, it's a lot of money. It's like, present day, because it's like in the 50s, because they don't tell you until like later on that it's in the 50s, but it's like, yeah, the amount of money from all of this would have been like what, 40 mil. So they got Sarah's attention, and she's not really into all this like Dean and Nadia are. I mean, obviously Ben's more invested in this because I was like, well, this adventure, for one, I get to make sure one of my siblings stays alive, but also like I want to make sure this family, because it's kind of like, oh, is it just a treasure hunt that I'm here for, or am I meant to kind of fix and make sure this family stays together? It's kind of a combination of two. It's like one kind of helps resolve the other in a way. I also love Ben's excuse being like, because Nadia was off at Finnish school, and it's like, oh, well, how'd you learn Spanish? Yeah, learned it at Finnish school. Oh, you know how to redraw the map because you looked at it like a couple times. It's like, yeah, I remember some details, some stuff I picked up at Finnish school. I'm like, I love that, just his excuse, because like, yeah. I also love that their dad's like clues also involved puns, because it's like, I know some people don't like puns. I really like puns. I think I'm a pun person. I appreciate a good pun, and even if they're not good, even if they're the type of puns that make you go ugh, like the later one where it's like, oh my god, shamrock, we're thinking of like, it's like, no, not shamrock, sham rock, as in a fake rock. And even Dean was like, wow, that might be your worst one, Dad. Like, I really like that. I was like, oh, that's really good. Once again, I love a pun. Like, no matter whether you like really enjoy it or whether you groan at it, because I know some people groan at puns. I love them. But yeah, they ended up having to go down the well, ended up navigating their way through, but then like part of the walk cave has been caved in, so it's like we should turn around, and it kind of led to a lot of unresolved stuff like building up and kind of because I kind of had this feeling when, once again, I thought I knew Dean's circumstances. Dean's circumstances aren't what I thought they were, but it is a situation where Dean, you could tell Dean kind of felt a little lost, and I thought they wanted to transition. I thought that's what their story was going to be. I thought that's what this money was going to help them do, to be able to transition, but it turns out that's not what the situation is. But like, obviously it comes head to head, because it's like Sarah kind of bad mouths Dean, being like, oh, you have nothing to go back to. You can't keep a stable job. You're wandering around like Dad. And Sarah, it's like, I've got a husband and children to go back to. But even Dean's like, yeah, look, because when they ran into Ricardo initially, Sarah was like flirting with him. It's like, oh, you think she wouldn't be doing any flirting considering she's married. But it's like, yeah, they talk about it a little bit, but her husband doesn't treat her well. And they kind of know that, sadly. But it leads to a more lengthier conversation later on. But it was just like a lot of their baggage and issues are like kind of coming up a little bit in that moment. But they kind of resolved that later on. But we'll get to it. I did think it. I figured she was going to do it the moment Sarah stuck her arm in there. I was like, she's going to pretend like, yeah, of course, because that's the classic thing to do. But then Ricardo shows up, gun in hand, and once again, lo and behold, the lawyer Wells is there. Wasn't expecting him to kill Ricardo. That was interesting. It's like, well, it makes sense too. No, there's no honor amongst thieves type of situation, because it's like, oh, why split the money with you even if I'm going to be giving you like 20%? Like, why even share that when I can just keep it for myself, all 100%? So, but I love the excuse they came up with. It's like, no, there's a trap, and you're going to need us to figure it out for you, because we're the ones that follow the clues and everything, so obviously we know what we're doing. Ended up getting the key from him. Poor bastard, Karma came back and crushed him under some rocks. So I was like, no, you weren't just knocked out, you're dead. So, luckily they were able to get out of there, and Sarah noticed Dean's bandages, and that leads to the conversation of Dean not wanting to be a man, but also not wanting to be a woman, very much in Ian's circumstance, which I love bringing that together like that, where Ben's like, oh, I have a friend back at Finnish school, my best friend. It's like, right, like, things aren't always so binary. It's like on and off, good and evil, and it's like people can be more than that. You can be non-binary, and it's like, it's really nice. I thought that was dope. For Ben, and even Ian's like, well, good on you, Ben. So it's like, yeah, because it's like, of course, it's like Ben would understand that better than anyone. It's like, yeah, I have a best friend who found themselves, and I think it's so beautiful too, because someone who's struggling to figure themselves out, of like, this is like, I don't want to not be a woman, or there's nothing wrong with being a woman. I don't want to be a man. I feel more comfortable this way, and I just thought that was so interesting. And those type of bindings on Dean's boobs, because Jen was like, "Oh, aren't those kind of dangerous?" It's like, and I guess maybe the material it's made from, because I could have sworn I've seen that in something fairly recently. I don't remember what it was. There was something I was watching where someone bound their boobs, and it was kind of a situation of, oh, that's kind of bad. And I was like, I wonder, was it because I forgot what it was. It was something I could have sworn like someone was bleeding, but I was like, is it because it's too tight, or is it just a situation of? It's just a situation of the material that was made from. I don't remember what I was watching. I was watching something that kind of covered that, but I just don't remember off the top of my head what it was. But either way, to be able to be part of someone's story to help them kind of figure stuff out, like Dean would have probably been able to figure it out eventually, but be able to kind of put a word to it and a name to it. And it's like, oh, like, Sarah being like, does that mean are you still my sister? It's like, no, I'm your sibling. And it's like, I'm perfectly fine with that. And Dean having the courage to say all that made Sarah confessed like she's leaving her husband because he's not good. Like, there were issues before they got married, but she thought them getting married would fix a lot of it. But it's like she's unhappy. The fact of the matter is she's playing like she has to stay in this relationship just because it's like it's what's expected of her, and she doesn't want that. These siblings kind of breaking onto the mold of who the roles they've been kind of cast in the 50s. So, but I love Dean just being like, "Cool, you just had to step on my moment, didn't you, sis?" But ultimately, they find the treasure. It is kind of dope. Like, right, they have to turn the key 4 times, each for one of them, the dad and for the 3 siblings. I thought that was beautiful. And they found the box, but it set off this trap because this all connects to like a curse because the jewels were offered as like some kind of offering to Quetzalcoatl. Which obviously, when I think of Quetzalcoatl, the first thing that immediately comes to my mind is Final Fantasy VIII, the GF, the Guardian Force summon. Quetzalcoatl, because back then I didn't know, like, I saw that name, I was like, I don't even know how to begin pronouncing that. It was only in like more recent years I learned how to pronounce Quetzalcoatl. But it's like, because obviously they're in Mexico, but I'm like, it is like a Mexican god, if I'm not mistaken. I believe like an ancient Mexican god. I don't know if it necessarily relates to thunder like it does in Final Fantasy VIII, but either way, doesn't Quetzalcoatl's attack revolve around thunder in Final Fantasy VIII? God, it's been decades since I played Final Fantasy VIII, so I don't remember off the top of my head. Either way, tensions and all that aside, turns out I was kind of wondering if this is going to be your stereotypical, it wasn't the treasure, it was the friends you made along the way. I was watching something recently that was referencing One Piece, and they're like, is the One Piece actually real, or is it going to be like some friendship along the way type of thing? It's like, no, I think a lot of people, I think even Oda says, like, no, the One Piece is actually a thing. It's not just like some friendship along the way. Who knows? But either way, it made me think of that immediately, because I was like, is the box actually going to have anything? And it turns out there's nothing in the box. It's empty. All that's left is a note. And it's like, their dad, it's like, yeah, I went searching and it didn't fill that void. I should have been home. Home is kind of where the heart is, and that's where I should have been. That was the treasure that was waiting for me the entire time. I just took it for granted and didn't see it for what it was. It is sad that they didn't hear these words from their dad until after he died. Like, he couldn't say them when he was alive, but it's just, I think sometimes it's easier to say stuff in words than it is, like, written down, than it is to actually say them, because it's just... Because even Ben was like, yeah, maybe he also didn't tell us because he figured we wouldn't listen, because they had a lot of unresolved issues with their dad and them bumping heads as siblings. Like, a lot of times, those circumstances, that culmination, you probably wouldn't have listened all the time. So I think, I don't know, like I said, it brought them together in the end. So they ultimately end up going home, but Ben hasn't left yet. He does leave a note for Hannah. Granted, it's like decades in advance, but it's like, hey, sis, can you send this for me, Sarah, and don't ask any questions? And it's like, okay. But then they ultimately end up finding the jewels. I was almost hoping, I was like, please don't let Ben leap before he actually gets to see it. But it's like, no, he gets to see it. And it's like, yeah, you get to see all the jewels. There's actually really sadness to it. You can kind of tell on Ben's face where it's like, oh, I guess it's time to go. But it's like, it's those moments where like you get attached to these people and their stories, and we don't actually get to hear what happened to the siblings afterwards, but I think they're going to be okay. I think we don't need to worry about it. I think they're going to be just fine when it's all said and done. I think they're going to find their happiness in their way forward, but I think there's a sadness to it where Ben's kind of like, especially because Ben's an only sibling, so, but he has family, so it's just a reminder of like, yeah, the family he's so far away from, but it's just kind of like nice to be in this family moment, but then like to kind of be snatched away from it at the end. It like always comes at the sad times because you're like, oh, it's time for me to move on, but it's like, that's the thing, always moving on, never quite sure if you're one step closer to home. It's like, did I take that from Kingdom Hearts 3? I know Sora has somewhat of a line like that in the beginning, but I'm like, I feel like I snatched that from Kingdom Hearts 3. But either way, tangents and all that aside. Other elements to this episode involve Addison and Tom. Obviously, they're moving up the wedding. It's just like they just got engaged. Like, seems like maybe like yesterday, maybe a couple hours ago, and they're announcing it to everyone. But they don't want to have a wedding. They want to have like a quick like court thing. And it makes sense. Addison's like, right, the last time I planned out a wedding, it didn't work out. So, life is short. You never know what it is. So our time is short. So we might as well take these opportunities while we can. But journeying with Ben this episode kind of changed her mind because she never quite found the right time to tell Ben. And I think all of it kind of made her kind of question her reasonings for this and why she's going so fast. It's like, right. So she ends up talking to Tom at the end of the episode. It's like, we need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. It's like, oh, I need time. I need space. And even Tom is like, I should have known. Like, you being here connected to the past, of course, that's going to make you question the present, which also makes us question the future. And she's like, no, this isn't about Ben. He's like, I think you'll take time and realize that it is. So it's like, I think there's a part of her that's still obviously in love with Ben. And, she knows he's alive now, and it kind of leads to this complicated thing because it's like, well, he's in love with Hannah, but they're like out of sync timeline wise, but it's also you're in the same boat, you're stuck present day where Ben is traveling all over time. You at one point had to let go and grieve him because you thought he was dead, but now he's alive, and I brought it up last episode, there's kind of like these complicated love triangles on so many parts because Ben's completely unaware. I don't think he fully understands what his role and what's happening with Addison and Tom present day because she hasn't talked to him about it. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go. It's kind of sad because Tom was there at like her darkest moment, and now it's like does that define, like, just because someone's there during your darkest moments, like, oh, does that mean you're going to be together forever? No. Does that entitle you to be together forever? No. Sometimes you think maybe that's that conversation of people in your life for a season and people in your life forever. Is Tom someone that's meant to be in your life forever? Because if they're meant to be in your life forever, it's going to potentially work out. But some people are just meant to be in your life to teach you a lesson, to be there in a moment, to help you, to lift you up. But they're not meant to be your forever person, your in-game type of situation. That it's going to be the interesting thing to see where Tom falls in that lane. Because obviously Jen's happy for her and everything, and her and Ian were talking about it, and even Ian's like, oh, where's Jen? And like, who are you who've replaced her? Because Jen was all about like, no, let's be happy for Addison. She's that's awesome because I mean, like, who knows? I mean, Ben's, the whole Hannah thing, but also, like, who knows if Ben's going to come home and how long it could be. So Addison shouldn't have to put her life on pause. But it is a thing also, you shouldn't immediately jump into stuff just because it's like, are you jumping into this because you have it's easier than dealing with, like, kind of like how the father, like, his grief made him run away from his children, and he was just kind of seeking treasure and stuff rather than being home. And Addison's kind of like, am I running from the Ben stuff and trying to jump headfirst into this time? Like, I got to take time to figure myself out. And I don't think she's quite figured out, like, is this really about Ben? It's not about Ben. Maybe it is more about Ben than she's willing to admit or recognize this right now. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of fall on that front. Kind of a 1-2 punch of like, yeah, oh, we're engaged last episode, to, yeah, it took like maybe not a day, maybe hours, maybe a day, but like for that to kind of not work out. But either way, like I said, we'll have to wait to see where that takes us. And also, I skipped over a little bit. Also, like, well, Hannah, speaking of Hannah, will she get the letter? Because, like, Sarah's going to send it, like, 20 years from now, but it's also, like, will she remember to? Hopefully she will. Because Nadia, obviously, is like, yeah, don't bring it up to me again because Nadia won't remember it, so on and so forth. Who knows? Time might be funny and fickle and make it so, like, right, it's 20-some years, so she might end up forgetting, or just something's going to end up happening to the letter because time is correcting itself. You don't get to, like, do that. But I'd like to believe that, because I'm assuming, like, I think Ben probably has it set up so that the letter shows up after Ben leaves, after, like, Ben left that episode. So probably like the next day or something like that, because there's an 18-month window before he obviously dies. So the earlier they catch it, the better. So because you also don't want to cause a little bit of a paradox of, I think, you sending it before you arrived in that time frame, because then it's like gonna be complicated, so it's like best to send that later. But anyway, the other aspect of this episode revolves around Rachel's boss, which the character's name is Rachel. I think last episode I referred to her as Emily. But yeah, the character Rachel, her boss found out that there's a traitor amongst her midst, and so they're trying to... it's like, right, if he figures out about Rachel, he's going to find out about Ian, he's going to find out about everything. So Ian and Jen are kind of still handling things on their own. Jen's trying to find a hacker who will go that route, but no criminals really want to try and, like, go head to head with Gideon. Gideon has too many connections of power. That's why Gideon was able to figure this out, because Gideon has plenty of law enforcement. It's like, yeah, it has people in the NSA to kind of help out with stuff like this. I was just remembering that. I'll get to it in a second with, like, the NSA and being rich and powerful. It made me think about something, but I'll get to that in a second. But either way, Jen is telling Ian, you can't handle this on your own. You need to tell Magic. We need to fill the whole team in. And probably, maybe it would have made things better. Who knows? But they got blindsided by the end of the episode because Gideon himself shows up. And I was like, ooh, who's going to be playing Gideon? It's James, is it Fran? James Frain, which I've seen this actor in so many things. Wasn't he in True Blood? I think True Blood might have been one of the first things I saw him in. The first thing that immediately comes to my mind, though, was like Orphan Black. I want to say that might be the most recent thing I'd seen him in. Wasn't he also? Oh God, that's what I also think. I think NBC wise, I think he was also. I don't think he was in Blind Spot, but I keep feeling like he might have been in Blind Spot, but I don't remember. Maybe not. But I want to say he was in Grimm, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing I was just thinking about, like, him playing this actor playing like a rich and powerful, like, dude getting whatever he wants. I was like, it made me think of, like, oh right, he was in Elementary. I believe that was like I can't remember if that was the final season or was that season 6 or was that season 7 that he was in. I don't remember which season he was in. I really don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember him being like the main antagonist of a season. But yeah. I think that might be the most recent thing, because I was thinking Orphan Black might have been the most recent thing I'd seen him in, but I'm like, maybe Elementary? I can't remember. I don't remember the dates, the years and stuff came out, but either way. So he's Gideon, he rolls up like he owns a place. He's like, no, Rachel, I told her it's okay, there's not going to be any repercussions. Oh my God, Jen, it's so nice to meet you. And Ian, oh my God, look at all of this. So it's like, cool. He's going to be an issue. Now, how is Addison and Magic going to feel about this? Once again, it is the thing of, even Jen tried to say, like, at the end of the day, you did what you had to, Ian, because it's like, Gideon's the only one with the money and resources to help us find Ben, and it worked in the end. You just didn't expect him to be who he is. Once again, I'm still got my money, and my theory after last episode, if you didn't hear me, I believe he's going to end up being Hannah's son. Maybe he changed his name or something like that, but I think he's going to be Hannah's son. I think, because it feels like those storylines, it just feels like there's got to be a connection present day, and I think that's what it's going to be. Maybe not, but I get the feeling. Because he's also playing an American, because he's a British actor. Yeah, he was British. I was just trying to make sure I wasn't mistaken, because I remember him having a British accent. But yes, he is British, but he's doing an American accent, so that could play into it more. I think it'd also be funny too, because like if he is Hannah's son, it'd be funny because like obviously Eliza Taylor is Australian, so it'd just be kind of funny. Like obviously she's putting on an American accent. for Hannah, and him, a British actor, putting on an American accent to play or something. Like, I think that'd be, I don't know. Once again, I'm just me being stupid. I love stuff like that. So that, I think, would be an extra layer of interesting if that ended up being the case. But that's my current running theory. We'll see whether there's any weight to that as we continue down the season. But yeah. I'm very interested to ultimately see where this new development takes us, what kind of effects this might have on Ben, and just finding out if Gideon is in fact Hannah's son. That would also explain why he's so interested in this project. Like I previously thought, maybe his mom became obsessed with it, and that's why. But also timelines changing, like stuff with Hannah, like Ben shifting or controlling that, might end up changing the trajectory of Gideon's story too, if it ends up being the fact is that's her son. Once again, we shall see. Really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.